Yes, I'm Alex, and today we're going to be breaking down the drum parts to loads of different genres of music. Now before we get started, there is one caveat to mention, which is of course, drumming and music in general is a creative art form, so everything we're going to talk about is somewhat subjective. So for any of the genres that we go through, you could find an example of somebody doing the opposite and making it work. But we're going to talk about what's most common and classic to play inside of each different genre, so that you can access the phrasing of your favorite drummers in that style. So with that being said, let's jump straight into the first genre, which is one that I'm sure a lot of you have played before, which is rock. So rock's a big genre with loads of different subgenres and different styles in there. But one thing you're going to find is super consistent is that the majority of the grooves are played using 8th notes and 16th notes, and we want to play those 8th notes and 16th notes straight. And rock music is an in-your-face genre, so we want to play with loads of power, loads of volume, and without holding back on the kit. Dig into your drums, cane it on the cymbals. A lot of the time in rock music, there is no such thing as too loud, so you can really let loose. A lot of the time, you'll be playing in standard time with your snare on 2 and 4, which you could call a backbeat. But in different subgenres, sometimes you also go double time, for example in punk music. So now, instead of feeling 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, we're feeling 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So our snare is at double the rate of speed. Some people prefer to write this out with the snare on the end like this, but personally, I prefer to write the hi-hat as quarter notes and then the snare staying on 2 and 4 because I find it a lot easier to read. And to be honest, playing punk music is not so much about reading the notation. As long as you know the feel, you're good to go, and you can smash it out and play as fast as you can on the kit. The next genre we're going to talk about is funk. Now, in comparison to rock music, funk is a lot more syncopated. So syncopation really refers to the spacing of the notes that you're playing. So if I played a super straightforward, evenly spaced rhythm like this, it's not a very syncopated rhythm, but if I played a rhythm like this, that is a much more syncopated rhythm than the first rhythm I played. So I personally think of syncopation as more like a scale of syncopation rather than something just is syncopated or isn't. So if we look at this groove here, you can see that we've got a lot of bass drums played on 16th note placements, as well as some snare displacements where we're pushing over our snare drum from 4 to the and of beat 4. You can think tracks like James Brown, Cold Sweat. Come on! And then we're adding in loads of ghost notes to fill the space. Sometimes we've got one ghost note played by itself, and at other times we're going to play 2 ghost notes in a row. This is really going to help to give the groove some more movement. We got some different textural options in there, like open hi-hats, closed hi-hats, and then these choked hi-hats in the 4th bar. And in that 4th bar, we're going to play these staccato stabs. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3. And then a little fill. Ga 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 ga. You'll hear funk bands playing these staccato kind of hits all the time. So if I play you this funk groove, it sounds like this. And by the way, you can grab the notation for free for all of these genres by following the link in the video description. But more important than learning these grooves note for note is the actual concepts that go into creating them. So with funk grooves, we've got syncopated rhythms, the wider range of dynamics, snare displacements, and staccato rhythmic hits. One of my favorite examples of this is Dennis Chambers playing the Fatback groove. Check this out, man. Too much feel, too much finesse. One of my favorite drummers of all time, mate. And it's worth a quick mention before we move on that you'll find a lot of similarities between funk and soul grooves. Typically soul grooves will be a little bit more laid back and a bit more simple than funk grooves, but funk was born out of soul music. So as artists like James Brown, playing with drummers like Clyde Stubblefield or Jabbo Sparks, started to add in much more syncopated rhythms, the genre pushed into funk music. Now, if we're talking about funk and soul, we've also got to talk about breakbeats and jungle music.
Me a the nutter, original, mad nutter, original,
Arguably, the most famous breakbeat of all time is the Amen break, played by Gregory C. Coleman in the Winston's Amen Brother. So basically, jungle beats were created by people sampling funk and soul beats and then speeding them up inside of their sampler, so they go from sounding like this sounding more like this. It's also why you often have a really high-pitched snare drum in jungle music, is because the snare's actually been sped up so the pitch has got higher. Now inside of samplers, you can also start to chop things up so that you can rearrange the phrasing of the drums. And this is where you'll start to get some really interesting breaks. So out of the Amen break, you can start to move around the different pieces to create your own version of the groove. So something like this. Sometimes it might be a simple variation on the Amen break, whereas at other times it might be pure chaos, just chopped up drums all over the place, pitching the drums up and down, getting super creative with it. And this is also something that you can practice on the kit, so you can start to improvise with the phrasing from the Amen break or a similar break, and then see if you can imagine that you're a sampler and start to chop up the groove to see what you can come up with. You'll have so much fun messing about with those grooves, so start off with the Amen break and then see if you can push from there. Now, if we think about jungle, we also want to talk about drum and bass. Now, drum and bass came a little later than jungle. It's typically played a little bit faster, so whereas a lot of old school jungle tracks are in the sort of 160s-ish BPM range, a lot of older drum and bass was produced at around 170. And now more modern drum and bass tends to be produced at 174 BPM, so it's gradually just getting a little faster over time. Classic drum and bass groove is almost like a simplified version of the Amen break. So you can see here on your notation that we got the same rhythmic structure as the Amen break, but just with a lot less going on. So you've got a kick on beat 1 and the and at beat 3, a snare accent on 2 and 4, 8th notes on the hi-hat, and then you've got the option to add in ghost notes if you choose to. So the groove I've written out would sound like this. Which you'll hear in so many different drum and bass tracks. Just go on Spotify and type in drum and bass, listen to a playlist, and I guarantee you, you're gonna hear that groove cropping up. Often in drum and bass, the drums are programmed rather than being sampled from an actual drummer playing on an acoustic kit, although that's not a 100% rule. But that does also mean that the drums tend to be super punchy, crisp, and in your face, and often produced with a much more straightforward feel. So sometimes you don't have any ghost notes at all, or you might even drop to just quarter notes on the hi-hat, maybe chuck a clap on 2 and 4 instead of a snare drum. Like any genre, it's down to you to create your own versions of the grooves and see what you can come up with, but you'll find that most drum and bass tracks are based around that kick, snare, kick, snare, kick, snare, kick, snare kind of feel. Now, another genre that's heavily influenced by sampling funk and soul beats is hip hop. A great example of this is NWA's Straight Outta Compton, which is a straight sample, again, of the Amen break. This time just played a lot slower.
You too play if you fuck with me. The police are gonna have to come and get me.
well as sampling beats in hip hop, of course people are still playing beats and programming beats. The majority of hip hop tunes are gonna have a slapping backbeat with a snare drum on 2 and 4. Eighth notes on the hi-hat is classic, but of course there's always some variation in there. And then the bass drum patterns tend to have a mixture of 8th notes and 16th notes, as well as it being super common to play swung 16th notes, like in this groove here. Trust me, if you listen to any 90s hip hop album, you're gonna find loads of tracks in there with that heavy backbeat on 2 and 4 and that swung bass drum feel.
Rappers are monkey flipping with the funky rhythm I be kicking. Musician, inflicting composition.
I was a terror since the public school era. Bathroom passes, cutting classes, squeezing asses.
My restlessness is my nemesis. It's hard to really chill and sit still. Committed the page, I write around.
Of course, experiment with the feel of the hi-hat with adding in ghost notes and with different textures, so open or closed hi-hats. But if you're playing a backbeat around 80 to the BPMs in the early hundreds, then you're off to a good start when it comes to playing hip hop. Now, another genre that's heavily linked to hip hop is jazz. So if we think about the drums in hip hop, often sampling or being influenced by soul and funk breaks, then the chord progressions are heavily influenced by jazz, with hip hop producers frequently sampling old jazz tunes to create their chord progressions. If we get stuck into jazz, you'll find that the approach to playing the drums is completely different from the other genres that we talked about so far. So a jazz tune is based around the quarter note on the ride cymbal, and then you add in what's known as a skip note, which is the triplet upbeat of beats 2 and 4. If you've been to any jazz club, you would have heard people playing that before. Then we're gonna add in our left foot on 2 and 4. You can think of this almost like your backbeat, which helps to give it a real groove and a swing. So unlike in rock and pop, where your kick and your snare are the dominant sounds in your groove, in jazz, your ride cymbal and your left foot are your anchor. So once you got your jazz time, then we can start to add in improvisations between different voices on the kit. Most commonly, the snare drum and the bass drum. This is otherwise known as comping, which I was always taught means to complement the phrases played by the other musicians you're playing with. So you might comp in different ways. For example, you might want to double up with the lead line. If a horn player plays da 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 da, maybe you also play da ga ga ga. You'll hear that kind of style of matching phrases a lot in big band. Maybe you want to play in between the hits, so if the horn line plays bat, bat, ba, ba, maybe you hold off until the space at the end. Bat, bat, ba, da, ga, boom, ga, boom. Comping decisions you make are totally subjective, and you'll improvise and change them up in the moment, which is also what helps to set apart different jazz drummers, because every drummer is making different choices. So if we have a look at a comping example, in bar 1 we're going to play our snare drum on the downbeat of 1, the upbeat of 2 and the upbeat of 4. 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a. In the second bar, it's the upbeat of 1, the downbeat of 2, and then we're filling in all the triplets in the second half of the bar. So you're gonna play ride, snare, snare, kick, whilst maintaining the jazz ride cymbal pattern over the top. So that comping example would sound like this. And if you wanted to push it further, you could then start to use that phrase as a basis for an improvisation. So start off with your jazz time and then see if you can start to improvise snare drums and or bass drums in different positions, moving around the bar. And then every so often, when it feels right, have a go at dropping in the comping phrase that we just worked on. This is firstly great for control. It shows that you're able to drop in whatever notes you choose to at a moment's notice. Also, it's a wicked way of coming up with improvisations so that you're not always just reading comping phrases from the page. This is especially important in jazz, as jazz is mostly improvised around a form. And of course, this is just one example of what you could play, but there's unlimited options. So it's all about just getting comfortable with the different positions that you could play your kick or snare, and then seeing if you can push yourself to start to work on creating different combinations to create your own phrasing. If you want to go deeper on this stuff, I've just launched the Your Intro to Bebop course on the Drum Hub membership. This course will take you from never having played bebop before to knowing everything you need to be able to jump up at jam sessions or to start to play in your own jazz ensembles. There's a link in the video description if you want to check it out and work through the course with me as I add new chapters. Now, another genre we're going to talk about today that's related to jazz is Afrobeat. And we can't talk about Afrobeat without talking about Tony Allen. Tony Allen and Fela Kuti were the originators of the Afrobeat sound, which combines elements of African rhythms, funk, soul, and jazz. The drum feel in Afrobeat tends to be really rhythmic and percussive, and something I've noticed is that there's often groups of 2 or groups of 3 consecutive notes played on one voicing in a row. Here's an example of a groove originally played by Tony Allen, which he calls his essential Afrobeat groove 1. So you can see here that the hi-hat pattern is 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a. So you get those groups of 3 in a row. The kick part is 1E, 3E, 1E, 3E. Again, we got those groups of 2 kicks in a row, and then the snare is 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and. Again, utilizing groups of 2 and groups of 3. So the coordination for this groove is actually pretty difficult because there's so many different rhythms interacting and interchanging with each other. So let's check out how the groove sounds. Something else that you can experiment with is taking the overall concepts of playing those groups of 2 and groups of 3 in a row and see if you can start to improvise them on the kit so that you create your own grooves out of this idea. And something really important is that we want to play the drums super light so you can almost take on the feel of more like a jazz drummer. We definitely don't want to push towards the more rock end of the spectrum. I didn't say it'd be easy, but it is super fun, mate. Now, the last genre we're going to talk about today is one with a completely different approach to all the other genres we talked about, which is reggae.
Them belly full, but we hungry. A hungry mob is a hungry mob. Stalker sense in me now, grooming in my backyard. I got the slow fish up on the road.
The most classic style of reggae groove has got to be the 1-drop. It's called a 1-drop because you literally drop the 1. You can see here that we don't play on beat 1, we've got a rest instead. Then we're going to play our kick and cross stick on beat 3 of the bar. And then you'll find that a lot of reggae drummers will then start to add in loads of improvisation and interesting phrasing up on the hi-hat. Sometimes straight, sometimes swung. Today we're going to focus on a swung feel. So our hi-hat rhythm here can be counted: rest, 2, 3, 4, and 2, 3, 4, rest, 2, 3, 4, and 2, 3, 4, So as an example of a 1-drop, it could sound something like this. And then, of course, you can experiment with improvising your own hi-hat rhythms over the top. The most important thing is that we don't play the 1 and that we keep our cross stick and kick together on beat 3 of the bar. Now, there are other styles of reggae grooves. So for example, you got a groove known as a stepper's groove, where really your bass drum plays more of a 4 on the floor kind of feel. If I play that to you with the same hi-hat pattern and the cross stick still on beat 3, have a listen to the difference compared to the 1-drop. So you can hear there that it really changes the feel, and you'll hear a lot of reggae tunes with that kind of feel on the bass drum. And another option is to play what's known as a rocker's groove. A rocker's groove, really from a drum perspective, is played more like a rock or pop groove. You could just play a straightforward backbeat, boom, gat, boom, gat. But really it's the feel of the other musicians that you're playing with that still keeps it in that reggae kind of style. So you'll hear artists like Sizzler or Barrington Levy playing with this kind of style quite frequently.
Every man deserves to earn. Jaja come a plant with success. Holding black roses in my garden. To keep and carry it, you've got to.
One final tip with playing reggae is that drags are your friend. You're going to find that in a lot of reggae music, there's loads of drags in there and drags leading into different phrases. And then when you're playing your fills, typically you still don't want to hit beat 1 of the bar. So you can wait until later on in the bar or at the end of the bar with the fill to play your accents on the crash. So we actually got through loads today, and it was super fun to dig into loads of different genres and have a look at the different approaches for them. Of course, you can always do your own thing with these ideas, but these will at least give you a really good starting point for getting involved with playing in these different styles. You can download the free notation below. I've also just launched a whole new category of courses on the Drum Hub membership, which is all about breaking down different genres. So if you want to have a look over there, as I mentioned earlier in the video, the first lesson is all about bebop. And one genre that we missed out from today's video is fusion, but fear not mate. I've got a whole video right here all about how to approach that style. So if you want to check it out, then I'll catch you over there.